Welcome to another episode of Southern Arizona's Nonprofits, the superheroes impacting our community. We're broadcasting live today on the Tucson Business Channel, a division of Mark Bishop Media, from the Stewart Title corporate offices on Broadway in Tucson, Arizona. We're brought to you today by SCIP, S-S-C-I-P, the Social Service Contractor Indemnity Pool, who's been insuring nonprofits like ours for more than 3.5 decades. I'm Barbara McClure, Executive Director of Impact to Southern Arizona, host of this show, and today I will introduce you to two organizations, both created to honor the memory of husbands who have passed away. The Terrance Pickrel Heart Fund gives assistance to patients dealing with heart trouble, and the Erik Hite Foundation supports families who've lost loved ones who were first responders. And I look forward to hearing stories about these two amazing men. And that's going to be the fun part, is really learning who Erik and Terrance were, as well as the work that's being done by the nonprofits. So thank you both for coming, and I'd like the audience to welcome me in joining Kathleen Pickrel, Executive Director of the Terrance Pickrel Heart Fund. I always think of it as Heart Fund AZ, as the website. But thanks for joining.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Yes, and it's a hot day in Tucson, so we're all enjoying a little air conditioning. Katrina Powell, she's here with me also, the Development Manager at the Erik Hite Foundation. So thank you for coming, Katrina.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Well, Kathleen, I'm going to start with you, and I was going to ask you, what made you want to start a nonprofit?
Besides being a little crazy, I started this fund because I've been a long-time medical social worker. I worked primarily with cancer patients for many years, and so I know the financial difficulty that comes with chronic illness or life-threatening illness. And then a couple years ago, it's almost 2 years now, I switched to becoming the heart transplant social worker at Banner. And as I was applying for that job, I had an epiphany, and I thought, why don't I start a fund that will actually help these patients with immediate needs? There's a lot of funds out there that, do research or do grant funding, that kind of thing, but there's not a lot out there that will help people who need food on the table, who need medicine, transportation, that kind of thing. And my husband had heart issues, and he ultimately passed away from heart failure after battling it for 13 years, and he passed away in 2014. So it was a nice way to honor him by naming it after him, as well as providing, really vital resources to really low-income patients out there.
Sure, and I bet there are a lot of them. I imagine heart trouble is...
Yes, and right now, since we've just started a year and a half ago, we provide aid to pre- and post-heart transplant patients and pre- and post what's called LVAD, left ventricular assist device patients. Those are sometimes people can't get a heart transplant either because of the wait list or for some other reason they don't qualify. So they may get this mechanical version, which is called an LVAD. So our fund provides grants for pre or post those patients.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
And I like what you're talking about, where it's just basic life. I mean, all the expenses that are hard to keep up with while you're dealing with that kind of thing.
Yes, when I was working in the cancer world, there were so many organizations that do research and that kind of thing, but really the one that helped us social workers the most was the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, because they had grants for transportation, for different, boots on the ground things that people need. And so I always thought, if I started something, that's how I want to do it.
Very nice. Well, what a nice way to honor your husband.
Thank you.
And let me ask you, maybe you can share some stories about him. What are the fun things that are the most fun memory or the greatest thing about him?
Well, if you look on our website, I have a few pictures of us, and I think they capture him. There's a picture of him in a straw hat and a lei and a margarita in his hand with a friend of ours. Well, I don't know if it's in this picture, a friend of ours behind us, like doing the bunny ears.
Oh, sure.
So he was silly in that way, but he was also very smart. He was an engineer, and he told me stories about reading the encyclopedia for fun as a child. So he was kind of like this interesting mix of people, but he liked to have fun, go swimming in the lightning storms and, crazy things like that. So he liked living life.
Sure. How fun. Mm-hmm. And then, but you said he struggled with heart trouble for a long time?
He did. He had his first heart attack at age 45, and I was only 35. And so that was the beginning of living with, heart failure. And it was tough. And he had a couple more heart attacks. He had stents placed throughout the years. And he, at one point, so this was almost 13 years later, he had an episode, went to the cardiologist. They did a, stress test, said, "Oh, you're about the same as you were 3 years ago, but let's do an angiogram just to see." And, he'd had angiograms all along because that's what you do when you have heart failure. And so he's like, "Just go to work. This is the usual."
Oh, dear.
But I didn't. And so we were at the hospital. He went in for the angiogram, and he died on the table.
Oh, my gosh.
And they tried to revive him for over an hour.
Oh.
And so it was, yeah.
That would be tough.
Even though he had heart failure, that was not expected.
Sure. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a crazy quick ending.
Yes. Yeah.
I would think that would leave you reeling.
Well, my whole life changed because I was a half-time social worker at that point for my life.
Sure.
And so being a half-time social worker, I was like, how am I going to live financially, number one? I had never lived on my own before. I had been married to Terry more than half of my life. And so all of a sudden I was living alone. I was grieving. I was trying to figure out the finances, and it's a blur. It's just a blur.
Sure. Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I can see why later down the road you have this epiphany to do something like you're doing. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's exciting.
Thank you.
Well, Katrina, maybe you can tell us about the Erik Hite Foundation and a little more about him as a person.
Sure. So Erik Hite was a TPD officer, and he was killed in the line of duty on June 2nd, 2008. He was pursuing someone who had been shooting up the neighbor's windows and then shot at a sheriff's officer, and unfortunately was ambushed and killed in that moment. His wife, Noemi, had a 1-year-old daughter at the time. And about a year later, much like you had mentioned, Kathleen, she felt very much full of energy and full of, what do I do with this? Where do I go? She's originally from Honduras. She didn't have any family here. So what do I do now? And so she made the decision to start the foundation to help families like her, either single mothers or families who've lost loved ones, first responder loved ones. And so she started with wanting to get a daycare for TPD officers. And that was her first dream. She said, I'm going to get a daycare together for TPD officers. And she did that.
I love that because I think childcare is such I want to call it a burden, the cost of childcare. Mm-hmm. In today's economy, we have a lot of clients where you have to have dual income earning. And so in so many cases, the cost of childcare almost negates an income.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And yet you feel like you have to do that until the kids are in school. And so that is a great thing that I think so many people must have been so appreciative of.
Yes, and she saw that as well in making a decision. What do I do now? Do I go back to work full time? What do I do with my daughter? And the greatest part is she made sure that the cost was at about 35 to 40% less than other daycare centers, and that there was extended hours. Oh. So the hours extend out to the evenings, the weekends, holidays. So they're there when our first responders have to work. They don't get those times off.
No, they have a totally different schedule. So that's true.
They do. So she was very, very intentional about what she wanted and what that was. It's also a very secure space. It's not ever publicized. So all of our families know that their children are in a safe place when they leave to work. And so we're very proud of that. And it started as TPD. It now extends out to all first responders and active duty military families.
And we should just say, because we have listeners from all over, that TPD is the Tucson Police Department.
Correct. Tucson Police Department.
People are like,
My apologies.
acronyms. It's the world we live in,
Yes.
but sure.
Yes. And so she's still very, very active and would have loved to have been here today, but she's at another conference. And so here I am.
Well, and can you tell us, because I was going to ask you, and because you brought it up, it's a conference for first responders, right? So can you tell us a little bit about this conference? It's an annual, and who goes to it?
Of course. So this was actually the first annual here in southern Arizona. Traditionally, the first responders in this area and southern Arizona have to travel to Phoenix for wellness conferences. And so the wellness department and Tucson Fire Department and Tucson Police Department got together and decided that they were going to create a wellness conference here this year.
Very nice.
And so part of what we do with our foundation is just assist them with whatever they need us for. And so we ran the registration process for them. That helps to we incurred the fees for that and that sort of thing, and just helped them with name badges and different things. So they had over 230 participants today. It is a free conference. It was at TCC. And so we had Border Patrol, firefighters. There were people from Tohono O'odham, Sierra Vista. There were even people from Tempe and Gilbert who came on down.
Well, from such a far away place. And for those who are not from Arizona, my husband is from Texas, so we look at it, and we're from Los Angeles area. So we look at it like Phoenix is the big Dallas, and Tucson's the cowtown Fort Worth.
We are.
A little laid back. But everything kind of tends to happen in Phoenix, and people forget. So I think that's a wonderful thing. I serve on a board. It's the same thing. Just about everybody lives in Phoenix, so the board meetings are always in Phoenix. And it's like, oh, gosh, But every now and then we have a retreat in Tucson. So, and everybody enjoys coming down for the cooler weather.
Yes.
Yes. And I bet people enjoy, even just getting out of the city and coming to Tucson, I think, is such a different thing anyway.
Really is.
So what a great place to have a wellness conference.
It was great. And we love it because we really want, Noemi always says that we support the person behind the uniform and their families. And so this is our way of making sure that their needs are being met, help build morale, and bring all of our first responders and active duty military what they need, especially in their stressful jobs. They're so stressful, and when we can help them, that makes a big difference for us. So we also provided childcare today for all the families. So
that is so cool.
I know.
So there's no excuse.
That's got to be a challenge too, though. That's probably a lot of children. But the Tucson Convention Center is pretty large, so I'm sure there's lots of space. But just activities and
it was
keep them busy.
Great.
Well, thank you. That's a neat thing to do for the community.
Yes.
And then I think it's kind of fun. I was surprised at all the other different services you do besides childcare. So maybe you can tell us about some of those.
Certainly. So Noemi had started with childcare, but if you meet her, you'll figure out that she's always wanting more. And so she went further and started a wellness component for our organization. So one of our largest programs right now that we're working with is wellness. And so we have support groups for law enforcement and firefighter spouses, significant others. They are moderated by spouses of firefighters and law enforcement. So they are some amazing women who have been supporting in that role for quite some time here in Tucson, and they coordinate those as volunteers for all the other wives and significant others who go through very difficult times. It's scary, and so it's great for them to have that, and provided with that is a counselor. So there's our spousal support groups. We also have parenting classes for our first responders and active duty military. All of those are free, so they can come in and again, take that off of their plate. So
that's really neat.
Yeah.
And again, I think when you're living in a world where your schedule is completely different than the rest of the standard scheduling, it must be hard to get into a lot of those things, parenting classes, or if you have time, or just the schedule and all, where you work so many days straight and then days off.
Right, right. And so we try to work very closely with the families to meet their needs and what they need. So,
Well, it sounds like you're doing a good job of it.
well, we try.
Well, we're glad you're there. Thank you. Well, and Kathleen, you were talking about, you're helping these families who are dealing with chronic illness, or like you say, a critical illness. And so how do you, because you're a new nonprofit, I was going to ask you, what was it like to start it from scratch? And then what is your biggest challenge today?
Okay. So a little overwhelming. So
Sure.
Sometimes it's good that you don't know what you don't know, and you're like, oh, I'll start a nonprofit, and then you learn, right? Oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I've been really fortunate though, because it's so interesting. So I started to fill out the paperwork for the nonprofit, right, to become one. And it's confusing and overwhelming, and I was sure I was going to do it wrong. And I actually found someone on the internet that does all the paperwork for nonprofits, and so it happened.
Nice.
It got started, and from there, I've just been very fortunate to have people along the way. We were talking off microphone about BNI, so I'm a member of BNI, and they've been very supportive. And how I got into them is my friend says, "Hey, my husband is going to become the president of this BNI group. Do you want to join?" And I don't even know what it is. And I'm like, sure. They're like, for nonprofits, the first year is free. I'm like, okay, I'm all about that. And
There you go.
So I've kind of stumbled along the way into good things, and I've been fortunate to have some medical professionals that see this cause that are on my board, and just people that I work with that have been really just supportive. But it is a lot of work, and I am looking for volunteers or board members who want to be very active and participate in a very hands-on way. So I'm open.
Good.
To this. And I think I only answered part of your question, but I can't remember.
I was going to say that's typical of when a nonprofit starts up, it does become the person the founder is doing all the management, and then the board members come on and they're still helping manage for a long time until you get to come to the next level. So I know it's a lot of work in the beginning.
It is, but I'm so glad I'm doing it, and I am doing it while I am working a full-time job. So it happens nights and weekends, but surprisingly, within a year and a half, we have helped over 50 people.
Nice.
So, and our grants are up to $500. So.
And how do you raise funds? I mean, because you're new, so you have to get the word out there, which hopefully our listeners will.
So it started out self-funded.
Sure.
Which, so the first year, a fair amount of the money was mine. But last year we did our first fundraiser, which was a trivia night and raffle. And it was a big success. Everyone loved it. So that is now our annual event. And so we have our second annual fundraiser, trivia night and raffle, next Thursday, April 18th. And that's going to be at Brother John's. So they have graciously given us the whole dining room. And that will be our second fundraiser. And I'm open to ideas and growing if anyone wants to
Sure.
partner with us.
Are you an Arizona tax credit qualified nonprofit yet?
Yes, thank
There you
you,
go.
Barbara.
We have until, Monday.
Yes,
Monday.
that is correct.
But
So
people can give on Tuesday for 2024 also.
Correct.
So it doesn't really just end on Monday, tax day.
right. So there are many qualified charitable tax organizations here in Arizona, and we became one in October. So this is our first year collecting funds that way, but it has been really helpful to us already because people can donate to our fund to the limit, which is $421 per individual and $841.
I think it'd be 842.
For the next few days.
for a couple, and if they owe on their Arizona state taxes, it's a dollar for dollar credit. So it's a net zero cost for them. So we have gotten quite a few people, even though this is new to us, that have contributed in that way. And so we're very thankful.
Well, that's exciting. And I always, we tell our donors too, if you've got multiple groups that you like, you don't have to contribute $421. If your tax liability is $398.42, we get checks like that too. So
Yes. Yeah, I've gotten that too.
that's kind of fun. Or to split them. My husband and I will split our 841, where we're both passionate in different areas or something we enjoy together. So
it's a really neat thing that Arizona does, and a lot of states don't do it, and it's confusing to people because mostly, it's tax deductions, which is not a dollar for dollar. So people are like, that doesn't sound right. And
it sounds too good to be true.
Right.
Exactly.
So educating, right? There's a lot of educating that needs to happen.
Sure. And I bet, Katrina, as the development manager, you are very familiar with all of that.
I am. So I worked a lot in schools before taking on this role. And so I worked with private schools and the private school tax credit, which is separate than the qualifying charitable organization. But one of the things that people often ask is, can we do both? And you can. So that's a myth I like to take out right away. Yes, you can do both.
In fact, there are more than two opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are plenty. So I work with it a lot. We're doing a campaign right now, 30 days, 30 new tax credit donations. So it started on March 15th, and I'm pushing on getting 30 more by Monday. We're at 17 right now. So
There you go.
I've got a weekend to get the rest of
So
them.
we just need, a dozen, a baker's dozen
Yeah, exactly. So.
donors to show up between now and Saturday or Monday.
Yeah. And I love doing cute little things like that because it really just builds, especially with our board and our families, they get excited about participating in community. Just all I need is this many more for today.
Right.
So,
Just a good goal.
a good goal, yes.
Very nice.
Yes.
Well, and then how does the Erik Hite Foundation raise money?
So we have two large fundraising events each year. On May 11th, we have our official 5K run. It is a fallen officer memorial. So the day starts, or the morning begins, with a tribute to our fallen officers from TPD, Tucson Police Department, and Pima County Sheriff's Department. And then it's followed by an official 5K, a family fun walk, and we also have a family festival. So we are going to have over 22 police trucks. PAC will be there with their truck, firefighters that the kids can go in and out of. SWAT will be there, and just really have a good
Probably
time.
a K-9.
Oh,
Of course.
definitely.
Always a K-9 unit.
Most definitely. There may be a submarine. That's what I heard. And but we'll also have vendor booths and jumping castles for the kids. So that's one of our big fundraisers. We're always looking for sponsors, still looking for sponsors on that end.
Is there an entry price to come to the event?
The event itself is free. If
Sure.
they choose to run it, is $40 per runner.
Nice.
And it does come with a T-shirt. So.
I would think that in that group of people, first responders, you'd have a lot of people who could run a 5K without any trouble. We used to do a 5K walk run, we called it, for our food, to bring in food for our food bank.
Yes.
And it was hilarious. And, you'd get all kinds of people. But I was thinking, well, you have first responders who are training all the time. So they must be, the start gun goes off or whatever. And all the first responders are way ahead. And then all the mothers in their strollers after.
Yes. Well, and they set up teams. So over the years,
boy.
they've set up teams. So it can become very competitive, but that's great. We love it.
I have to say, we had Golden Ranch Fire District come to Impact today because a senior gentleman and his wife, somehow, the key got locked in the car.
Oh, no.
And so they were trying to figure out they were going to call someone, and they'd come in from quite a ways. So they were going to call someone who lives about an hour and a half away, have them come down, pick them up, take them back home to get the key and come back. And I said, the Golden Ranch Fire District is right around the corner, and they will be here very quickly. But we were laughing. And I said, you're going to think it's so much fun to watch them. And they were looking at me like I was kind of crazy. But 3 people showed up, and it took them longer to get into the vehicle than they expected it to, than anybody. But you could see this jockeying and this competition about, okay, well, you haven't been successful, so give me a try. I think I can do it. We were just saying it just seems to come with the territory. But
Yeah.
all the whole staff and all the people who were on the property at the time were so appreciative and enjoyed watching it and laughing and having them as part of the community. It really is great. So I think that's such a neat group of people to support.
I have found it wonderful. So, like I said, I was in education prior to coming on, and I've been with them for about a month and a half now. So I'm really new. But during my time, just the people that I have met, the idea of what they do on a regular basis, and then still have the kindness and compassion and just jolly when they come around the office and when we interact with them, always very appreciative of what we do. And so I just think that's great, and I love the opportunity to support them.
Yeah, it's such a neat thing. And I think both your missions, I think for the first responders and then for people with heart trouble, my father had his first heart attack at 35.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and then he had a second one, later, much later, like in his 50s. And then a couple of bypass surgeries. Usually you get one stab at a bypass, but he'd had the first so early that they did allow him to have a second. So we have a family that has heart health in our history. And so we're always conscious of it. And it's a long road when you have something that really is just slow.
And it's the number one killer in Arizona and the country. It's number one. So everyone either knows somebody who's dealing with heart failure or is related to, or they themselves have it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
the numbers are staggering.
And again, what a nice way to support people with those funds. And then what you're doing, like with childcare, so that the person doesn't have to figure out how to pay for childcare, especially that spouse who's left as a single parent. And
it's the daily things, right? The daily things that, you still have to take care of in addition to dealing with all whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, it's just another level, isn't it? Another layer on top of what you're regularly managing.
And people often look at the upper level, right? The higher layer, whatever's the immediate need, whether it's, medical attention or whatever's happening, with the first responders. But it's that those daily activities or the daily bills or whatever that really people really, really struggle with and don't get enough attention.
Right. And that really does take a toll, not only on their physical health, but also their mental health. And so being able to support that is to just take that little thing away even if for a moment, will make a big difference for them. So yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I really think the child care issue has to be a huge piece for families, the relief. We have 2 grandchildren, and just the first one was expensive. And then when the second one came along 3 years later, I know our kids are like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's really like, having another mortgage. So, well, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, and we'll be back shortly.
Today's program is brought to you by SKIP, the Social Service Contractors Indemnity Pool. SKIP is a member-owned, member-directed insurance provider with more than 3 decades of insuring Arizona social service organizations for their property, general and professional liability, and auto claim exposures. With an Arizona-based staff of claim underwriting and risk management professionals, SKIP specializes in providing personalized service, affordable premiums, and coverage which meets and often exceeds the state of Arizona's contract requirements for social service providers. For more information, visit our website at www.sscip.org or ask your insurance agent about protecting your organization with insurance coverage through SKIP.
Welcome back to Southern Arizona's Nonprofit Superheroes. We're here today with Kathleen Pickrel, who's the Executive Director of the Terrance Pickrel Heart Fund, and Katrina Powell, Development Manager of the Erik Hite Foundation. Both organizations started in honor of the husbands. These wives started these nonprofits to honor their husbands. And we have with us Katrina, who is not the wife, but who is the development manager and working in the organization and who just recently arrived. And so I was going to ask you before the break, we were talking about events, and you were talking about your big event on May 11th. And it sounds like a great fun party for the community. So maybe let me know where that is and then tell us about the other thing that you had going on.
Excellent. Yeah, so May 11th, it is from, I think it starts at 8 a.m. I know it starts at 8 a.m. And it'll run to about noon, and that is at Reed Park.
Oh, what a fun
Ramada
place.
20 and 22. And if they go to our website, you can register for the event. But it is a free family festival, so all families are invited to attend the fun parts of it.
There you go. That's nice. Not the setup at 6 in the morning for the 8 o'clock
Well,
start.
whoever wants to come out and help, we'll accept all volunteers.
I was going to say, every organization in Tucson needs volunteers. So,
Always.
and this is the fun. If you're passionate about heart health or you're passionate about helping first responders, here are two great opportunities to volunteer in many ways, I'm sure. And then what's your second one?
Our second one is a gala that we host, and that will be November 9th, and it is our 10th anniversary for the gala.
Fun.
So this is a very special one. Our theme is La Noche de la Mariposa, so the night of the butterfly, and it's based a little bit on the Encanto theme, the Disney Encanto theme.
Sure.
Erik, who was from Germany, or was German background, and Noemi had her background was in Hispanic, and so we really worked to build those two together for that evening and celebrate what they have done together. So to celebrate Erik's legacy, but also Noemi and what she has continued to put forth in the Tucson community. So that is going to be a wonderful evening.
Now, how are you bringing the German into that?
You know,
I'm just curious. Working
I
on
think
that.
there's colors, and there's a whole committee for that part of
Oh,
it.
I'm sure. There are lots of great German traditions. Did you say it was October or November?
November 9th.
Oh, okay.
November
I was
9th.
thinking, well, October makes me think of German.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, but
November 9th at Star Pass. So it will
Oh,
be at the
that's a-
Marriott Star Pass.
beautiful location.
And of course, we're always looking for sponsors.
There you go.
And then just attending the event, there's Dave Bray, USA, is a former military, and he will be doing our entertainment for the evening. And so we're excited to bring him in. And there'll just be great food, a silent auction, a live auction, and just a lot of fun. So
Now, let me ask you, what kind of entertainment? I'm not familiar with his name, so is he a stand-up comedian or a singer or a,
he's a singer.
magician? No.
He's a wonderful singer, and so he does a lot of tributes and really works hard with first responders and firefighters, police officers. So we're excited to have him in there. So he'll be singing with us.
Very nice. That sounds like a fun event.
Yes, yeah. There's quite a bit that goes on that evening.
Oh, it sounds like it. Well, it sounds like you'll be very busy.
Yes.
You and your teams
Of course.
at the foundation. Well, I was thinking, it's kind of fun. I wanted to hear the stories about the husbands in the beginning, just to be able to get to know who these men were and why their wives started these organizations and kept them alive through all of it. So that's so exciting. But I was going to ask you, Kathleen, too, if you have, because you've been in the medical world on the medical side yourself, it's not the same as, you're the wife of a police officer, but you're not in that police work. But to be in the medical, and then I think that gives you a very different perspective than a lot of people who are starting a nonprofit. So do you have some stories of patients that you've helped? You were saying earlier you've helped so many.
Yes, I was thinking about one in particular because I think it highlights a variety of points that, this patient, he got an LVAD, which I mentioned earlier, left ventricular assist device, which is an MCS, a mechanical circulatory system.
I can see why they shorten all those words.
So in layman's terms, if that side of the heart is not pumping, correctly, and the person for whatever reason can't get a heart transplant, and it may be because they can't get one. There just aren't that many, number one, and number two, we do a whole evaluation workup. It's not like, oh, you need a heart transplant and then we just transplant you. There's you have to be well enough physically otherwise to do that. You have to have the right body cavity. I mean, there's just so many things that go into it. So the gentleman I was thinking of that we helped fairly recently, he had a left ventricular assist device. So, the cool part about that is It's a pump and it's attached to the heart. So it pumps constantly. So you don't have a heartbeat anymore. So when the first responders come, they have to let them know you're not going to get a heartbeat. And sometimes they don't believe them.
I'm sure.
It's like, yes, I will. Yes, I will. It's like, no, you're not going to get a heartbeat. So,
And it's implanted inside their body, correct?
So here's the interesting part.
Okay.
It is implanted in their body, but it is externally driven. There's a drive line that comes out of their abdomen, and there's battery packs. And so it's a whole thing.
Sure. So you're not going to be, it's not like it's a hidden thing when the responders come, but they might not be familiar with it.
Right. And if you're dressed in a certain way, you can't tell, actually. So this one patient that we helped, he actually was a gentleman that lives up in the Navajo Nation and is getting help down. He got his surgery down here in southern Arizona. And as I mentioned, it's externally driven, so you have to have electricity, right? So he let me know that he had gotten into some financial difficulties. His car had broken down, and he'd put the money in the car, and things were just a jumble. And oh, by the way, I have a shut-off notice for my electricity tomorrow.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Gosh.
So the nice thing about being a small nonprofit is, so I have part of my board, we review the applications. So I can submit an application, or any social worker that works with heart transplant patients in the state can submit an application, but then it gets reviewed by 2 social workers as well. So that's part of our due diligence, is it has to be sent in by a social worker, and then it has to be reviewed by 2 social workers. And the nice thing is, we're so small, is I said, hey, I submitted this application for this patient. Can you 2 review it? And I was able to pay his bill the same day.
Very
nice. So he
nice.
did not lose his electricity. And so, I mean, it's things like that just make you feel really great.
Sure. And, what an interesting thing to think about.
Things you don't think about.
Not at all. No.
Why would you?
Well, and even, because like you say, battery packs, I think, if you're on a long drive even, I mean, that's a scary thought.
You have to think of a lot of things.
Sure. Changes your life for sure.
It does.
More than the obvious way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I bet he was very grateful.
He was very grateful.
Sure. That's a neat thing. There are some different groups, too, in the state who, through LIHEAP, the feds will give people in low income or in specific situations an opportunity to get some of their bill paid. So that's a neat thing.
Right. And one of the other things I was able to do for him, because he obviously hadn't let them know, because they should not have been able to cut that off. So I called the company also and said, hey, you can't cut
Ever.
off. It can't ever cut off this guy's electricity.
Sure.
Yes. Exactly.
So you get to be an advocate also.
Oh,
that's
yes.
very cool.
That's the
As a
social
worker,
part.
I was going to say, it just comes naturally, doesn't it?
It does, yes. You know, we can't have injustice out there.
No, but that is a pretty cool story.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I think it's interesting also because the Navajo Nation is so far north of here. And then, as you said, anyone from around the state can come to you for
It's
assistance.
so interesting how people wind up in certain centers for different, a lot of it is insurance driven.
Oh,
so
sure.
Actually, you may live close to, say Banner here in Tucson, but your insurance only allows you to go to Mayo up in Phoenix. And so sometimes, like the Navajo Nation, they'll wind up at Banner, Tucson because of insurance issues. And we have patients from New Mexico. So our fund is if you are receiving care in Arizona. So we do have some patients that live in New Mexico, but they got their transplant here in Arizona, and they come every year for their care. And so if they're low income, then we're looking at they need to stay overnight for lodging because they,
I was thinking about that for the Navajo Nation residents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I actually just approved an application today for a patient coming from New Mexico because they have an appointment one morning at 7:40 in the morning, and there's no way. And And they have to qualify. They have to be 350% of the poverty level or lower. So we're really serving those people who have really no other means of support.
Sure. And then when you're going through something like that, I'm sure even if you have insurance, your co-pays and things eat up your income as well.
If I may, it made me think of one other.
Yeah.
There was a lady who her husband was admitted up in Phoenix. He was going to get a transplant, and she lived farther even north. They lived farther even north in Arizona, and he was going to get the transplant, but the insurance doesn't pay for the caregiver to be there until they're discharged. Oh. So she was going to have her husband get a surgery that he could die in and not be able to be there because she couldn't afford the lodging.
Right.
And so we were able to provide that lodging support, which was really nice.
Very nice. And I think that's the whole point, right? It's the things you don't think of and the behind the scenes expenses.
Yeah.
And those are pretty direct related expenses.
Exactly.
I mean, so that's very cool that you're able to do that.
Thank you.
Well, I bet there'll be a lot of people who would like to fund that kind of thing, especially if you've ever been a person in that situation where you've had to make those choices. Mm-hmm. That would be.
Where's the food going to come from? Or, how am I going to get there? We do gas cards. We do food cards.
We have a client at the moment who has to be in Phoenix at the court for a murder trial. Mm-hmm. And she's low income and lives in a far out rural area. And so we decided to put her up in a place close to the trial because it was her son who was murdered. And, I think, well, don't you need some closure to go through that? She has to be there for part of it to be a witness. But the idea, and she's an older gal, and she said, I don't even think my car, she needed new tires on her car just so she could drive. And originally she's thinking she had to go back and forth, but it's the same thing. We were able to get her tires with some great community partners that we have who said, we'll sponsor some. She had bought some for the back tires, but she was paying on them, on a credit card. Yep. So someone said they would pay the credit card, pay the cost of those tires. And then somebody else who's in the tire business said, I'll donate the front 2 tires. And, so I think that's what's really neat about Tucson. And we have so many nonprofits, but we also have a lot of resources. And this is what's fun when we can bring people together and find out how we can connect to make these kind of little miracles happen.
It is a really giving community, I think.
I would agree.
So much more than others, I think.
That's why I say it's perfect. It's all these superheroes. These nonprofits are superheroes. I just really honestly believe that. And there are so many nonprofits in Tucson. For those who aren't familiar with our city, it's just amazing. And so to be able to cover so many things for so many people is exciting. Well, how about you, Katrina? Do you have a story about, I know we just recently in Tucson had a police officer pass away, and maybe you could speak to his situation if you're working with them or anybody else, because I'm sure you have a lot of stories.
Sure.
Well, you're relatively new to the company, so but at least in the last 2 weeks, I'm sure.
Right. Yes. So yes, unfortunately, we lost Adam Buckner to a car accident. He was on a call. He was going to a call, and unfortunately, he passed in the accident. He was well known and well liked originally from Louisiana. He has been out here for about 3 years, I believe, and services were for him on Monday. And talk about community. If you saw it on TV, or if you happen to be downtown and watched the procession, that went from the Fox Tucson Theater all the way to the police station, singing there was beautiful bagpipes. There was a jazz band because he loved
Louisiana.
Louisiana. So as we marched down, they played, the Saints.
Sure they would.
And so that was quite a sad moment to celebrate such a beautiful life. And his wife is young, she's a teacher, and so that just brings us, at the end of that day, I think for our team, we felt very happy that we could support in the ways that we did. both as a spouse and helping her with anything that they needed. We were the main funding or funding gatherer for the family. We do love the idea of crowdfunding, but there's a lot of fraudulence that comes with that, and the fees. And Noemi was really particular about that, because when she went through it, there were a lot of people who used her name and Erik's death to get money that she never saw any part of. And so we worked really closely with the Tucson Police Department chief and the wellness and the PIO to make sure that we were the funding source, that they came to us, and then 100% went back to the family. So we assisted with the services and such, and so that was wonderful that we were able to help in that area. And Noemi was able to help with his wife directly. They've established a relationship, which is great. Very similar stories in that she's there. They don't have family either. They came over from Louisiana. So, but it was quite a moment on Monday, a sad one, but again, a beautiful celebration for his life and all that he did. He was a great leader, and he enjoyed life, and I think much like Erik, he enjoyed motorcycles and just being active. They were both very active, so they had very similar stories, but very active. He liked to. Adam enjoyed hiking and being in the mountains, and his dog, and just spending time with his wife, and he loved music. And Erik was the same way. He loved his motorcycle, he loved his church family, and he loved his daughter and his son. So there was a lot of that similarities. So It was great to have Noemi and her ability and her background, and such a resource and strong woman to be able to share that with Adam's wife and the community, the Tucson community.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Gosh, we're so lucky that
really
both
are.
these organizations are in our town, in our city.
Oh, thank you. We're glad to be here.
You're so welcome. Well, what does the future look like for the foundation? How long has it been around?
So the foundation started in 2009. Right now, a couple of our big things that we are trying to work on is to build 2 more daycare centers.
Good.
So that's going to take some, assistance from investment.
Okay, donors, volunteers, people listening.
And so we are working on one on the south side of Tucson, and we're hoping that will help to serve the correctional offices, the FCC, all of those areas, off of Wilmot, and anyone coming from South Tucson, Sarita, Vale area, we can pull in families from there, and then another on northwest side of Tucson. And so that's on our child care. Noemi is very excited. She's planning, along with our team, a youth conference for first responders and military families that will address grades or students 12 through 19 and sort of help them in what a uniqueness it is to have that person as a firefighter or a police officer, and help with resiliency and mental health and different things like that. So that's happening in August.
So I'm sorry, these are the children of current first responders?
Yes, the children. We work a lot with the preschool and below. So our daycares are infant through 5-year-olds before they go to kinder.
Sure.
But they're not the only ones who have that. And when we look out into our youth, there's a lot of need there as well, especially as they grow and they start to understand. And outside, the world aren't always kind. And so if we can help to build some of that and let them know that they are not alone, and that they have a really wide family together with them, we're excited to be able to do that and partner with some of the area, a lot of community members at today's event where we spoke about it, and they're really excited about getting on board with us too. So that's happening, and then we'll be just doing more support for all of those families. So yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Well, that sounds like you've got a big future ahead of you.
Yes.
And then I imagine, Kathleen, your future is just growing and growing and growing, isn't it? To get it really well established. And
it is. I have a vision, and it's bigger than it already is. So our mission, the first part I've already I got the nonprofit going and we're giving out funds, but I have a second part of our mission that I haven't been able to start yet, which is provide community outreach about heart health. And
Nice.
so that's the next phase that's going to be, rolled out as part of this mission. And I also have goals that ultimately we will be able to give grants of up to $1,000 rather than the $500 right now, and also to expand that to not just be heart transplant or LVAD patients, but to advanced heart failure patients in general, because not everyone, maybe they're on medication and not to that point where they're going to get surgery or those kinds of things, but they still need a lot of help. And so I'd like to expand it to advanced heart failure patients in general. So we'll get there.
Oh, sure you will.
Yeah.
Impact starts their 25th anniversary on July 1.
Wow.
So
oh my goodness.
And we started, similarly, we received a grant from Pima County, a CDBG grant, and we bought a house, this little slump block house that was on an 11-acre state trust land lease. And we operated our food bank out of the master bedroom and master bathroom that had been gutted, and slid the window open, that aluminum window on the old slump block house, and nailed up a wooden shelf on the outside. So that was the food bank, and you pass the food out the bathroom window. So, that's how it starts. Mm-hmm. But we just are wrapping up our last year's audit, and last year we invested $3.5 million in the community.
Wow.
So, but we started with only 25,000. So, you will be there soon, I'm sure. It's an easy. I think when you're passionate about what you do, it's easy to grow it. And just like you're saying, well, I have this one thing I'm doing, and it's really important, but there are all these other aspects that tie into it. And I think that's kind of what happened at Impact. We just keep growing and growing, and we have all kinds of plans for the future, because if you have somebody at the helm who is that way in thinking, then there's always a need out there that somehow relates to what you're doing, or how can we take our clients and even move them more forward.
Yes. I think it's that saying that if you have a strong enough why, you will figure out the how.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's true. When our kids grew up, in our kitchen, we had an art wall at the kitchen table, and across the top were these giant letters. Before that was really popular, but it said "Imagine" on the wall, and it had crazy artwork like cats driving convertibles and chairs, etchings where chairs looked kind of like people, and so our kids were raised in this environment of that. And I said, well, that word's up there because if you don't imagine it, you'll never get there. Right. Because you have to think so far out of the box and think about the things that you want to do that seem impossible. But once you can imagine what it would be like, then like you're saying, that natural pathway comes along, and before you know it, you're doing it. Or you're walking down the road and you're thinking, wow, we actually got here. So, and I think all those things that you're doing are wonderful, because we at Impact are always talking about, when it's the American Heart Association, for instance, when it's heart health awareness, and we will put flyers out in our food bank, because we give out 800 distributions. 800 families come and visit the Impact Food Bank every month. And so they all get an Impact bag that's a bonus pantry bag. So that's an easy bag for us to throw out, 800 flyers in a month to learn about heart health, which is part of the nutrition and nutrition and wellness education. So that educating our community is so huge too.
Yes.
So that'll be very cool. Well, I imagine you'll both find lots of donors and lots of volunteers. Is there anything in particular? How about with you, Kathleen? Any volunteer? Like you were saying earlier, you've got a couple of people on the board, so you're trying to grow your board. And do they have to be medical professionals, or they can be anything, I'm imagining?
Yeah, really, I have the medical people already.
Right.
I need people who are passionate maybe about our cause and just wanting to do something, work with us to volunteer, to get out into the community, if I could do more events, if I have more volunteers, we could actually plan more. So if people are interested in putting together events or doing social media for free. That would be lovely. That, really, if you think you might have something and you might be interested in our cause, just reach out and we'll have a chat.
There you go. And, I think we're coming up on the summertime, too. Here in Tucson, it comes faster than in other places. We were just comparing school calendars and people aren't getting out till, the end of June. But we're getting out in just after the middle of May. Mm-hmm. And, I think that we at Impact encourage high school students, especially who need credit for graduation, community service or National Honor Society or all kinds of different people need to find a place to do work. Mm-hmm. And what a great thing to get some young people in, or college students who are on a break, to do social media and all those things they're so great at anyway.
Exactly.
So there's an option.
Thank you.
How about for you, Katrina? What kinds of volunteer work do you guys need generally?
Well, we're always looking for volunteers for our events, so that's always an option. And there are some volunteer opportunities at the daycare center as well. So if you love kids, enjoy kids, that is something that I would say reach out to us, because we're always looking. So, and it's a great environment. I enjoy. Whenever I'm having a down day, I want to go there because they'll make me happy.
At that age, 1 to 5, I would agree. 3
well,
and
the
4.
babies too. There's infants, so they talk about the little ones. So it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be very fun.
Yes.
Well, I thank you both for coming today and being on the show. And I think we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of fun things that probably a lot of people are aware of, like you're saying, heart trouble. And we certainly all know about our first responders in our community. So hopefully you'll find some support from the community, and we appreciate all you do. So thank you so much for being superheroes, nonprofit superheroes.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.